Hi, it's Penny Black and Jill Foster here with more holiday inspiration. And for today's card, I will be combining some stamping, painting, and also die cutting to create this fun scene featuring the new creative die Santa's Sleigh. And I'll also be combining that with our holiday snippets and Woodland Beauty transparent sets. And here's just a quick look at the supply list, and I just wanted to pop that up there and let you know that I will put it back up on screen at the end of the video. And if you want to pause the video at that time to have a closer look, you can do so. So to begin, I'm working on Canson 140-pound watercolor paper, and I just use a piece of scratch paper that I had die cut just a basic circle in order to trace a circle onto my paper. Now I'm using an ink palette and putting some inks onto it. I use, for the first color is Wild Honey Distress Stain, and then the next ones are Distress Ink Reinkers, and I used Rusty Hinge and also Chip Sapphire. And the reason I use the stain for the first color, Wild Honey, is just basically because I didn't have that in a reinker. And so you can use the stains, you can color with the marker onto, like a distress marker, memento marker, or a Tombow dual brush pen onto your palette, and then pick up that color to paint onto your design. The first thing I'm doing here inside of the circle is just painting a very light layer of water. This will help the colors of the inks that I apply to stay inside of the circle. I'll start with that Wild Honey color, and I just want to get this all over the interior of that circle. And this is just a nice light layer of yellow. While it's still wet, I'll pick up a touch of that Rusty Hinge and blend that up on the upper left-hand corner of the circle and sort of down across from that on the bottom right. And I will put the ink right on top. And if I need to, like there, I'm just blending out with a little bit more water so it's not as dark over the entire circle. Here I'm just dabbing off my brush, and with a fairly dry brush, or what's often called a thirsty brush, I was able to just move some of that lighter color up into the darker color. And that just creates a more even blend from dark to light. Because this had a layer of water first, it gives you quite a bit of time to sort of move around the color, to blend it, add more water, go in with the fairly dry brush, and get the blending the way that you like it. So I went ahead and used my heat gun to dry that before I paint the rest of the background. And again, I'm putting down just a layer of water, and then I'm going to pick up that Chip Sapphire color, and that is a strong dark color. So it does help to have that layer of water. And while it's still wet, I'll just keep moving that around. But I try to, when I put down the ink, when I pick it up from the palette and the first place I put my brush, I try to put that right close to the moon or the circle there, and then keep blending it out with water as it moves further away. You do have to be careful that you don't touch your brush onto the yellow or get it too close, because then that will start to bleed out a little bit more. If you wanted to avoid that, you could just paint die cut a basic circle and paint it and then glue it onto a blue background. So there's definitely, if you are having trouble with that or you don't want to worry about that, you can definitely do that, and that would even give the card even more dimension. And with the Distress Ink Reinkers used as a watercolor, they're actually quite forgiving, especially once you dry them. The color seems to sort of flatten out, even out, the brush strokes fade away a bit, especially on this cold press watercolor paper. And we're going to be splattering lots of white ink to give the look of snow and drawing some snow on with the white gel pen. So really, don't worry if you're painting this background and it's not perfectly smooth or perfectly blended. We're going to just keep working on it till it looks the way that we like it. There's so many different ways and things you can add to your background so that you're happy with them in the end. I was taking an art class recently, and the instructor said, the first thing you do is put the paintbrush to paper, and all the rest that you do with your painting is try and fix what you've done. And so I try to think of that sometimes when I'm painting, that You just got to put the paintbrush on the paper and then just keep working at it till you're happy with it. And that's exactly what I'm doing here with this blue and this background, just adding more layers and blending until I am happy with the look. And before we go on to the next step, I will heat that with my heat gun. And then I also just hand trimmed a little snowbank from that same Canson 140-pound watercolor paper. And I'm just painting the very top of that a little bit of a shadow that will match that sky color. And then I'll dry that as well. So now that those are both dry, I'm going to take Ranger Archival ink in the color of hydrangea. And I've chosen this type of ink mainly just because I like the color. So you can really pick up any ink that you like, the color, and apply it at this stage. It doesn't matter what type of ink you're using for this particular background because we're not going to do much more on top of it. And I found that just sort of smoothed out some of the painting that I had done. And then I also wanted to just give it a little bit more life and brightness, especially down here at the bottom. So this is the color of Broken China, and this is a distress ink, and I'm applying it with an ink blending tool and a foam pad, starting off the edge and working on in a circular motion. And I really love just that little bit of lightness that using that bright Broken China color added to the background. And I'm also putting that along the edge of that snowbank too. So now I'm going to put this piece into my MISTI stamp positioning tool. And the reason I've chosen to use a stamp positioning tool for this is just basically because watercolor paper has a little bit more texture to it. And so when I'm stamping this really detailed tree, this is from our Woodland Beauty set. I use this tree a lot. But by using the stamp positioning tool, I can re-stamp it several times so that even with that textured watercolor paper underneath, I can get a really crisp, dark image. And I am inking this up using that same color of archival ink, the hydrangea. And then I'm just going to stamp it right here along this side. And I love how this card, it doesn't have much bulk, and it actually comes together really quick. You could definitely mass produce this for a holiday card, but it has such an impact and an artsy look. But it's just so fun to create that, paint that moon and that sky and then do just a little bit of stamping. And really the die cut totally makes it. Once you put that die on there, it just is so fun and just the right amount of detail. So now I'm just repositioning that same tree. I'm going to stamp it here just a little bit lower. I'm not worried about where the base of those trees are because that hand trimmed snowbank will cover that right up. And again, doing just a few impressions onto that textured watercolor paper until it's a nice, crisp, dark image. And then while I have this in my MISTI stamp positioning tool, I'm also going to stamp my sentiment. This is from our holiday snippet set, and I stamped that in jet black archival ink. Now before I add my splatters using the Dr. Paige Martin's Hydrus watercolor, I did put just a little piece of post-it tape over that sentiment because with my luck I would get like a big blob right there on the sentiment. So this way I can just splatter away and I don't have to worry about that. I just pour a little bit out onto an acrylic block and pick it up with my paintbrush and pat it on my finger and just add a lot of splatters. For this background I just felt like the more snow and the splatters I added, the more I liked it. So I just kept going and going. If you don't have this watercolor, you could also use like a white acrylic paint and just water it down until it's a good consistency for splattering. And if you don't want a big mess, you could also put it in a box before you add your splatters. Now that watercolor was diluted just a little bit with water, so when those dry, they're not bright white or very bold. So I also take a gel pen and just draw in a few snowflakes. And I like the combination of the lighter ones and the more opaque ones to add more depth to the scene. So this is that great Santa sleigh die cut, and I'm taking that archival ink pad, the same color that we did the background inking and the stamping with the hydrangea, and I'm just rubbing that ink pad right across the die. And the die was cut from Nina Solar White cardstock, so it's nice and smooth and it just absorbed up that ink perfectly. I put dimensional adhesive on the back of the die and then adhered it to the card. I love the way that looks with dimensional adhesive, and the card is finished. Thank you so much for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also connect with Penny Black on Facebook, Pinterest, Twitter, Instagram, as well as on our website and blog, and I'll link to all of those down in the YouTube description box below. And as promised, here's that supply list. Thanks for watching.